Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to see Module 22 and problem solving using C. Today I'm going to explain one of the most important concepts in programming, C programming, functions. Functions are often called the building blocks of programming. They help programmers organize code efficiently and convert complex problems into smaller, manageable solutions. By the end of this presentation, you will understand what a function is, how functions are categorized, and how return values and parameters affect function behavior. Now we are going to see what is a function. A function is a self-contained block of code designed to perform a specific task. Instead of writing the same code again and again, we write it once inside a function and reuse it whenever needed. There are three main advantages of using functions: self-contained block, code reusability, and modularity. We are going to see each one in detail. Self-contained block. It is a dedicated piece of code designed to perform one specific task. In other words, each function performs only one task, making programs easier to understand. The second one is code reusability. Write once, use anywhere in your program. Once written, a function can be used multiple times from different parts of the program. The third one is modularity. Break complex problems into organized, manageable components. Large programs or problems can be divided into smaller components, which simplifies development, testing, and debugging. In simple words, functions makes programs cleaner and more organized. Now we are going to see two different kinds of functions. In C programming, functions are broadly divided into two main types based on how they are created and used. These are library functions, user-defined functions. Library functions are pre-written built-in functions provided by C standard libraries. They are ready to use, but we just need to include the right header file. Whereas user-defined functions are the functions that we write to break our program into modular, usable pieces. Understand the difference between user-defined functions and library functions helps programmers decide whether to use existing functionality or create their own customized solutions. Now we are going to see in detail about library functions. As I said, library functions are pre-written and built-in functions provided by C standard libraries. These functions are already implemented by experts, so programmers do not need to write the internal code. To use them, we simply include the appropriate header file at the beginning of our program. Now we are going to see some of the key characteristics of library functions. The first one is standard libraries, the second one is direct usage, the third one is well tested and efficient, and the fourth one is save time. First, they are a part of library functions such as stdio.h for input and output operations and mat.h for mathematical calculation. Second one is direct usage. They allow direct usage. We only need to call the function. No implementation is required from our side. The third one is well tested and efficient. These functions are well tested and efficient since they are used worldwide. They are optimized for performance and reliability. Finally, saves time. They help save development time because programmers do not need to rewrite common functions like printing output, reading input, or performing calculations. Now we are going to see some of the common examples of library functions. The first one is printf, which is used for printing formatted text to the screen. Next one is scanf, which is used to read a formatted input from the user. The third one is sqrt, which calculates the mathematical root of a number, and this requires including the header file math.h. These functions makes programming faster and easier. Now let us move to the second type, user-defined functions. Functions created by the programmers to perform specific tasks. They divide a program into modular, reusable parts, making code easier to understand, read, debug, and maintain. Unlike library functions, user-defined functions are created by the programmer to perform specific tasks according to the program requirements. They allow us to divide large programs into smaller, manageable parts. User-defined functions improve code reusability, code organization, readability, debugging, and program maintenance. Instead of writing long blocks of repeated code, we place the logic inside a function and reuse it whenever needed. So this is syntax of user-defined functions. We have the return type. Return type specifies the data type of the value returned. It can be int, float, void, etc. And the parameter list specifies the input values the function accepts. It can be 0 or more. And within the quotes, we write the body of the function. And return value is the statement is used to return a value back to the calling function. So call the function multiple times from main or other functions. Now let us understand this with a simple example. Here we have written a function to add two numbers. The name of the function is given as add and the return type is given as int. This function add takes two integer parameters a and b, performs additions and returns a result. The keyword int before the function name specifies that the function returns an integer value. But how we are going to call the function? Int sum is equal to add 5 comma 10. In this statement, the function is called with the values 5 and 10. The function calculates that sum and returns a result which is stored in the variable sum. So the value of sum becomes 15. So the function takes two integer parameters and returns the sum. It can be called anywhere in the program after its definition. Now we are going to talk about functions by return type. Functions in C can be classified based on whether they are sent a result back to the calling function. This classification depends on something called return value. Some functions calculate a result and return it, while others simply perform an action without returning anything. Functions that return a value. Functions that return a value. Functions that return a value perform a computation and send the result back to the caller. The return type tells us what type of data the function will return, such as integer, float, or character. Here we have written three different examples. The first one is multiply, the second function name is divide, and third one is get first char. The first function multiply multiplies two numbers and returns the result as an integer. The second function performs division and returns a floating point value. The third function get first character extracts and returns the first character of a string. In the first function multiply, we are taking two integer parameters x and y, and we are going to multiply x and y and return the integer value back to the calling function. In the second function divide, we are going to take two floating values a and b, and we are going to perform the division and return a floating value back to the calling function. In the third function, we are going to take a string and return a character back to the calling function. So the key main characteristics of functions return a value are they compute and return results, use specific return types such as int, float, char, can be used inside expressions, and must contain return statement. Now we are going to talk about void functions, that functions return no value. Not all functions need to return a value. Some functions simply perform actions such as displaying output, updating data, or interacting with the system. These are called void functions. Some of the examples are void display menu. This function is used to display only a menu. We have taken three printf statements. The first printf statement is going to print start game. The second printf statement is going to print load game, and third printf statement is going to print exit. This function displays a menu but does not return any value back. So the main purpose of this void functions are they perform actions like printing, modifying data, or interacting with systems without returning specific results. The keyword void indicates that no value is returned. Now we are going to see functions that return categorizing functions by parameters. Functions can also be categorized based on whether they accept input values. These input values are called parameters. Parameters allow functions to work with different data each time they are called. Functions with parameters receive data from the calling program. These parameters behave like local variables inside the function. Here we have given an example, greet, that is going to take two parameters, name and age. So this function receives a name and age and makes it flexible for different users and prints a message hello. The second example is for power. Here we are going to take two parameters, base and exponent. The function is going to calculate power using inputs provided during the function call. Now the next is functions without parameters. Some functions do not require external output, that is, no input is required. These functions do not accept any input values when called. They perform a predefined specific task without needing external data. For example, here we have written an example, get underscore random underscore number. This is a function name. This function is going to return a random number without needing input. The second example is show underscore welcome. This function simply prints a welcome message. Now we are going to see functions at categories at a glance. Functions can be classified into two ways, based on return type, based on parameters. Based on return type, the functions that return, we can categorize them as functions return values and functions that do not return any values, known as void functions. Based on parameters, we can say functions with parameters and function without parameters. So combining these gives four common function types used in C programming. That is, function that returns values, function that do not return values, known as void, function with parameters, and function without parameters. Summary. First, the return type defines whether the function sends data back. The second is parameters makes function flexible and reusable. Finally, choosing the correct function design depends on whether your task needs input, output, or both. Understanding functions is essential because almost every large program relies heavily on them. Function help programmers write smarter, cleaner, and more efficient code. Mastering functions is the first step towards becoming a strong programmer in C. Thank you.